Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. Patrick, it is technically our fourth podcast of the week. The Lost podcast,
Yes.
2 podcasts after that, and now an emergency podcast because Kyle Tucker is a Cub. It happened. This is not Jake Peavy. This is not Brian Roberts. This is arguably the biggest, maybe it's not even arguably, it's the biggest move Jed Hoyer has made that's not sending away the main piece, right? Biggest acquisition he's made. I think that's fair to say. I don't think I'm missing something here, but a monster deal, one that completely changes the lineup, completely changes the way we view this offseason. I think it's, we're going to talk about what they gave up in a little bit. All of you stressing about that. Look, to get impact talent, you have to give up talent. This is a bold move. It's aggressive. It is what we need to see from this front office. They need to start acting like there was a sense of urgency, and that they weren't just looking to improve along the margins and satisfied with 83, 84 wins. This is pushing in. We can talk about what happens beyond 2025, but I get it. I get the hand wringing, and I get when you listen to them talk, they talk about beyond one season. But my guess is they have a plan in place, and they also understand that it's time to win.
No doubt. I mean, this is a signature move for Jed Hoyer, one that may ultimately define his tenure here. Certainly the type of all-in move we have not seen in quite some time. You're talking about one of the best hitters in baseball, the truly elite talent that this roster has lacked. And, we spend way too much time on social media. We read the comment sections. We talk to friends, family, people we bump into at the winter meetings, at the grocery store, wherever it is. I was like, what are the Cubs doing? And finally, this is an affirmative answer of like, yeah, they're going for it. They're trying to win. And I'd imagine that this can't be the end of it. This is not going to be hire Craig Counsell and then basically run the same team back. I don't think it means handing, Tom Ricketts' ATM password over to Scott Boras, but I do think there's going to be more moves. Cody Bellinger is going to get traded.
Right.
They have to.
Yeah. Why don't we get to what's next? Yeah. You're right. Cody Bellinger. That's probably next. I mean, would you be surprised by that? I don't think so. If it happens soon, that makes a lot of sense. I think Cody Bellinger is preparing to be traded. The Cubs haven't really hidden that all that much.
No.
I guess my biggest question is what the return is, and if it definitely is the Yankees that he'll be headed to. Beyond that, my question, like a big question I have, is who plays third base? It was pointed out to me. It was like someone reminded me after the piece we wrote, kind of touching on Matt Shaw, that hey, they also get a draft pick if he's Rookie of the Year and starts the season on the team. That could be incentive to at least start him on the team. I think just shooting out some text today, I was told at minimum, who knows what happens the rest of the winter, but it would have to be a competition. Nobody's handing a job to Matt Shaw right now. I think that's fair. You can't, you're competing, right? You don't add Kyle Tucker and then say the rest is all rookies or something like that, right?
Right.
You gotta make sure you at least have competition there. But I think it's that's my main question. We know there's more coming, right? It's not just going to be Cody Bellinger traded and then play the kids.
Yeah, and I do think pitching still has to be addressed. I am very curious about what they do at third base. You had mentioned in one of our pieces on The Athletic, maybe there's a stopgap guy, someone we're not maybe that's not super obvious, or someone that could, play third base in stretches. But like, this is why you build up the farm system, that you have not only a trade piece in Cam Smith, but you also have a guy like Matt Shaw who can be in the conversation here. And, look at the pitching side. I know Hayden Wesneski never quite put it all together, but he was an effective swingman at times. I think they were pretty high on his future still. And
Right.
I just think that's an area that they got to kind of go after and really supplement.
Right. Pitching has to be an area that they upgrade, right? Again, we talked about Bellinger. I don't think they've hidden the fact that they want pitching. There's more pitching coming. They added Eli Morgan. They added Matthew Boyd. There's more coming. Whether it's a huge move, whether it's we know this guy's going to be in the rotation move, we'll see what that is. As far as giving up Wesneski, I was hearing a lot that they were high on Wesneski. I don't think they wanted to give up Wesneski. I know they were high on Cam Smith. I ran into multiple amateur people this week. One person laughed when I mentioned Cam Smith. He's like, they can't do that. Again, amateur people are going to be biased. Amateur people are in love with the guys that they just saw in the draft, but there were a lot of people around the game in the amateur side who loved Cam Smith. If the Astros think if Astros fans are out there thinking they didn't get much in this trade, this is a haul for a rental. It's not the Juan Soto haul, but it's not the same return for Mookie Betts, Paul Goldschmidt, Francisco Lindor. This is better than that. Maybe, the Lindor names were decently big at the time, but this feels bigger. This feels more impactful. Like I said, Wesneski was inconsistent, but I know there are teams out there that think, hey, I don't want to get my hands on this guy and see what we can do with him. That's that happens a lot, and sometimes it just never works out. Cam Smith had 2 months of pro ball. Everyone fell in love with him. We don't know what he's going to be. And Isaac Paredes, look, he struggled in his time here. I think he's a really quality player, and I think maybe the Crawford boxes were built for him. But we'll see. We'll see how he performs and how those final 2 years, 3 years, right? He had 3 years too. He had 3 more years left. That's a ton of service time. That's a ton of years left. This is a hefty price. I don't think you could say the Cubs stole Kyle Tucker. But again, I go back to this is what you have to do to get a superstar on your team.
Yeah, but they got the best player in the deal by far, right. And that's usually a good strategy. Look, Paredes was not a player who grew on you the more you watched him. Like, I don't know, to me, seemed like a guy who was good at kind of compiling WAR more so than playing the game. Maybe it was just a bad stretch. He could rebound, particularly hitting in that ballpark and maybe in a different environment. But do you think he's going to be a great player over the next 3 years? I didn't really get those vibes in just kind of watching him, on top of the fact that the Rays kind of gave up on him and moved him. Like, I think we both have received those signals of like, the Rays kind of knew it was time to move on. And that to me is usually a good sign that something bad is about to happen around the player. Look, Wesneski could put it together. Change of scenery. He still wasn't going to crack their opening day rotation, especially since they have 5 pitchers and they're planning to add another starter. And look, Cam Smith has played like 5 games at Double-A. I don't know if he was quite a reach, but he was certainly someone who had kind of like come on really fast, but still years away from being like an everyday impact player on a playoff team. And, if you're the Cubs, obviously you had to haggle and you had to negotiate, but I don't think you lose much sleep over what you gave up in this deal.
Right. And part of it is, look, they built all this depth, and we've been saying this for like at least a year now. I know going into last winter, I was wondering if they were going to make a trade. But when you build this much prospect depth, eventually some of them have to get moved. Yes, would it have been nice to get a player that is under control for more than 1 year? Absolutely. Those players are hard to find and you're not always timed up for those, right? That's why I would argue, I often said, like, the timing can't be perfect sometimes. You just have to go get the guy when he's available, right? This time the timing was kind of perfect. They're in a win now phase, and they had to go get him. They had to be aggressive. You cannot keep passing up these opportunities. They weren't in on Paul Goldschmidt. They weren't in on Francisco Lindor. They weren't in on Mookie Betts. They weren't in on the Juan Soto trade. They weren't in on the Juan Soto signing. How many big names have they not been in on? Like, these opportunities, you can't keep saying pass. You have to go in at some point, and they did, right? And we can talk about why. What is this signal about the Cubs, right? It's what I just said, Patrick. They're in a win now phase. They're not trying to, like, they're what have we seen the past 2 years? 83 wins. They're, like, keep repeating this. They're not terrible. They're not a 70-win team, but they're not good enough. They're just not good enough. Kyle Tucker puts someone in this lineup that the opposition has to game plan for. I like Seiya Suzuki a lot. You've heard me talk about how much I like him. There's no like hiding my thoughts on his offensive skill set. He's a high-level offensive player. He is not that player that the opposition says, okay, we can't let him beat us. Okay, how do we get him out? Oh, crap, what are we going to do? He's up to bat with men on base in a high-leverage situation, right? Maybe he's that type of player, but he wasn't treated like that by the rest of the league. I think that matters. That's not measured in some, like, in any numbers, but that does matter in some fashion. And I think he changes the way the lineup looks. Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki are better because Kyle Tucker is in the lineup. As much as I liked the Isaac Paredes trade, and I liked it because of the boldness and the aggressiveness, he was another player. It's like, this guy's good. He's really good. I don't think he's elite. And that's what they have now. We don't, like, if anyone disagrees with the fact that Kyle Tucker is elite, an elite talent, I guess they just aren't paying enough attention, because he's one of the top 10 bats in the game.
He's that classic guy who can give you that 3-run homer, like that big swing the Cubs have been missing so many times over the last 2 seasons. He's a guy who delivers, and when you have that in your lineup, it helps the other hitters relax. It buys you some time for the rest of those young prospects and young players to develop as the Cubs are sorting out their bullpen again next April and May. Gives them a little more breathing room. Like, the game is about power. The Cubs did not have enough of it, and this guy brings it as well as almost anyone in the game.
Right. 143 weighted runs created plus since 2020, I believe, is what I wrote. These are the guys with 140 or better since 2010 in a Cubs uniform in a full season. Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant. That's it. Who were the, like, key pieces of a World Series team were Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant. So pretty good guys to have on your team. He's also more valuable defensively and on the base paths than both of them. I mean, Chris Bryant was a great base runner, but I don't think he stole many bases. It's a different game now, but still, like, he can steal a base. From what we understand, that injury from last year is not something that's lingered. It was more about, like, the weirdness about that wasn't like, it was a misdiagnosis essentially, or at least told to the public as a misdiagnosis, a bone bruise, when it was actually a fracture that just needs to heal. It's not like this devastating injury, right? So he's healthy. He's an impact talent. This is the Cubs going for a jump in wins, looking for a way to change the dynamic and go to the playoffs in 2025. It's it's what everyone has been asking for, and just frankly demanding. Act like a big market team. Be bold, be smart, be creative and aggressive, and they did that. So, it's not perfect. It's not over yet. We need to see what else they do, but I like the lineup a lot, even with a hole at third base.
Yeah, I mean, message received, right? I mean, how many times have we asked Jed Hoyer about the idea of star power, and they went out and got a guy who, I don't know if he has the most magnetic, outgoing personality. He has the game for it. We'll see how he kind of adjusts to Wrigley Field, but I think it also shows a lot of progress internally in terms of scouting and player development. The fact that Cam Smith, who was like a draft eligible sophomore, could kind of get hot, rise up their draft board, and kind of go off in the minors and become that headliner prospect guy, and that the Cubs could do that without really sweating it, as well as throwing in a nice young pitcher under long-term control and still feeling pretty good about their depth. Like, these are the signs, as Craig Hounsell would say, of a healthy organization.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, look at the Cubs have so many prospects still, like Kevin Alcantara, Owen Casey, Matt Shaw are all going to be up this year, unless any of them are used to trades. I don't believe Matt Shaw will be traded. Who knows what else they have their hands in and what they're trying to pull off, but I would not be surprised if there's another move of some sorts in that way. Yeah, it's a fascinating move, and it's finally something for fans to be excited for. I'm happy for fans in that sense, where it's like there was a lot of negativity building up, and there was also this feeling that the Cubs are kind of slipping into irrelevancy, right? Like, they weren't disastrous, they weren't awful, but there was no national buzz about the Cubs. Nobody's talking about the Cubs. They're just there.
Yeah.
And they're almost being overlooked in a town where there's so much dysfunction in the sports world that you needed something good to look at, and the Cubs weren't taking advantage of that. And now it looks like they're at least trying to. That feels good for the city and the sports fans, at least the Cubs fans in this city.
Yeah, I think this is one of those. I know one of our segments of kind of what they gave up, and we had to explain that, and that's interesting, but is not really something I think we're going to linger on. It's like, what did they gain? And they gained some credibility. They gave themselves a much better chance to compete. They'll have a year to essentially recruit Kyle Tucker as a free agent. And, this is why they spent years kind of building this system up. And you can't really worry about what Cam Smith might do in like 2029. Like, this is an organization that absolutely has to win now, or else there's probably going to be major changes next offseason.
Right. And who knows if Kyle Tucker walks in a year? We can discuss these things over the course of the season.
Get a draft pick, draft another college hitter who played well in the Cape Cod League. I mean, come on. It's not that hard.
And when we talk about relevancy, this is one of the texts I got from a competing exec. We went back and forth, and at the end of it, he's like, well, the Cubs are in the mix again. About time. That's like people around the league have been saying, what are they doing? I don't understand what the Cubs are doing. I don't understand what direction they see. Like, now, at least it makes a little sense, and people, they're not the butt of jokes. They're not, they're not just, like I said, falling into irrelevancy. Like, there's something to talk about here in a positive fashion. Let's see what else happens, Patrick. We'll likely be recording Monday or Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised if we have more to talk about then. We'll see. It'll likely be Tuesday, right? That probably makes the most sense with what we're hearing regarding access to Tucker and Jed Hoyer. So we'll have more to talk about, is my guess.
No doubt.
it won't be a boring weekend either. So, thanks for listening. I hope you guys were entertained with this week of podcasts. It was a hectic week, but it ends on a high note for the Cubs. Enjoy your weekend. Celebrate Kyle Tucker. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, Northside Territory. Make sure to subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I will have more Kyle Tucker thoughts and whatever else the Cubs are doing the rest of this winter. We will have plenty of thoughts on that. Thanks and take care.